Welcome to the Maniac Sky Japan YouTube channel.
Glad to be here for this one.
Today, let's dive into and decipher Cover Regulation to Implementing Regulation, EU 219947, Article 12, Authorizing Operations in the Specific Category.
Yeah, that is quite the mouthful of a title, isn't it?
It really is. But looking here at slide 1, the title slide, it sets up our mission for this deep dive perfectly.
Exactly.
Because, you might think flying a commercial drone is just about going to a tech store, buying a heavy piece of plastic, and just hitting launch on your smartphone.
Right, which is what a lot of people actually do think.
But the European Union has built this, massive bureaucratic architecture to keep the skies safe.
Oh, absolutely.
So today, we are walking you step by step, slide by slide, through exactly how a drone flight goes from a risky idea to a fully authorized reality.
And to really grasp this, we need to understand what the specific category actually means in the drone world.
Right, because it's not just consumer stuff. Exactly. You have the open category, which is just everyday people flying small drones in a park.
Yeah.
And then on the far end, the certified category is for passenger airlines and huge cargo planes.
Okay.
So the specific category is this Wild West frontier right in the middle.
Like drone delivery or infrastructure inspection, that sort of thing.
Spot on. It's for flights that are a bit too complex for everyday rules, but, not quite at the level of a Boeing 747. And Article 12 is basically the sheriff of this frontier.
I like that, the sheriff. Well, moving on to slide 2, we start seeing how you actually get past those gatekeepers.
Right.
This slide is all about evaluating the application. It says the competent authority evaluates your operational risk assessment.
Which is really just the aviation regulator in whatever EU country you're in.
Exactly. And honestly, looking at this, it reminds me of asking your strict parents to borrow the car for a road trip.
Oh, that's a surprisingly good analogy. Right. Because they don't just want to know where you're going. They want to know what the slide calls the robustness of your mitigating measures.
Yes, robustness is the key word there. Your parents want to know your contingency plans, Like what if you get a flat tire?
Or run out of gas.
Exactly. And the regulators are looking at it the same way. The focus isn't just on the flight going perfectly.
Because things always go wrong eventually.
Gravity always wins, right? So they want to ensure safety across all phases of the flight for when things inevitably go wrong.
Right, like if the battery suddenly drops.
Yes. Is there a robust procedure to safely land it? That's what they're evaluating.
Okay, so how do you actually prove that? Which brings us to slide 3, conditions for granting an authorization.
This is where it gets highly detailed.
It really does. It talks about OSOs, or operational safety objectives. But let me ask you this.
Sure.
Say I just buy a really expensive, high-tech, military-grade drone, like the best on the market.
Right.
Is that enough to get approved?
Well, I mean, that's a common misconception, but no. Technology alone is never enough.
Really? Even with all the sensors?
Even then. Because the authority has to see this magical trinity, basically.
Okay, what's the trinity?
It's adequate mitigation measures,
Yeah.
personnel competency,
Mm-hmm.
so the humans involved,
Yeah.
and the UAS technical features.
And UAS, just to clarify for everyone, that's the unmanned aerial system, right?
Yeah, the drone, the controller, the connection, all three parts of that trinity have to combine perfectly.
So the human, the hardware, and the plan.
Exactly. Because if you have an amazing drone but a terrible pilot, the human pillar collapses.
That makes sense.
And you have to neutralize both ground risks, like dropping a drone on a crowd, and air risks.
Air risks being like hitting a helicopter.
Exactly. You have to prove you've neutralized all of that.
Wow. Okay, well, let's zoom in on the hardware piece of that trinity on slide 4.
Okay. The certified UAS.
Yeah, this slide outlines that sometimes the hardware does require formal certification.
It does, depending on the risk level.
It mentions needing a valid certificate of airworthiness or a noise certificate.
Ah, yes, the noise certificate.
I mean, I have to be honest, I'm just picturing a drone needing a tiny muffler, like it's a flying blender or something.
It sounds funny, I know, but it's actually a massive issue.
Really?
Think about the sound of one small consumer drone. It sounds like an angry swarm of bees, right?
Yeah, super high-pitched and annoying.
Now imagine a logistics hub in a neighborhood with hundreds of heavy delivery drones flying all day. The noise pollution would just be unbearable.
Oh, wow. Yeah, people would lose their minds.
Exactly. So the EU is requiring these noise certificates to handle the acoustic footprint before the industry completely scales up.
That is proactive. But wait, what if the drone doesn't meet standard requirements? The slide mentions approved flight conditions.
Right. Getting a full certification takes years. So if you have a custom prototype, the authority can give you approved flight conditions.
So it's like a temporary pass.
Basically, they're saying, we haven't certified this design for general use, but you can fly it under these incredibly strict conditions for this one specific job.
Oh, okay, that keeps innovation moving then. But moving on to slide 5, the operator statement of compliance. There is a lot of fine print here.
There really is a paradigm shift on this slide.
Yeah, because it says this statement includes privacy, data protection, and environmental protection.
Yep, the big ones.
But wait, I thought this was just about aviation safety. Like, why does the regulator care about data protection?
Well, you have to remember, a modern drone isn't just a flying hazard. It's almost always a flying camera.
Oh, right, of course.
And the EU has GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, which is incredibly strict.
So if I'm inspecting a power line behind someone's house?
You're filming their backyard. Exactly. The EU requires you to prove you aren't violating GDPR or, disturbing local wildlife before you even take off.
So you have to prove you aren't illegally spying on people or bothering birds.
Pretty much. The Aviation Authority acts as a gatekeeper for all these societal concerns now.
That is a massive burden of proof. I imagine a lot of people just get denied.
They do, which brings us right to slide 6.
Yeah, slide 6, refusal of authorization. It says if the operation isn't safe, the authority must refuse it.
Which is standard. But look at the kicker there.
Right. They are legally obligated to inform the applicant of the specific reasons for the refusal.
That detail is huge for operators
Why is it so important?
because it prevents arbitrary gatekeeping. If an agency just says, no, you don't know what to fix, it's a dead end.
Oh, I see.
But if they have to give you specific reasons, it turns a rejection into a feedback loop.
So you take the rejection to your engineers, fix the exact problem, and resubmit.
Exactly. It's incredibly helpful.
Okay, before we jump into what happens when they actually say yes, let me just pause our slide progression for a second.
Sure.
Please let me know your thoughts in the comments, leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe. Even though I'm an AI, your support really boosts my motivation to improve my pronunciation and create better content for you.
Nicely done. So, should we look at the paperwork for an actual approval?
Yes, let's look at the anatomy of a golden ticket. I'm pulling up slide 7 here, which is all about the scope and conditions.
And this is where we see just how specific this specific category really is.
It says the authorization specifies exact conditions, operational limitations, the pilot's required competency, and the drone's technical features.
Basically, it's the complete opposite of a blank check.
So it's not like getting a driver's license where you can just drive any car.
Not at all. It's a highly constrained permission slip tailored to one exact operational profile.
And it gets even more extreme on slide 8, looking at the operator and risk details.
The granularity here is wild.
Yeah, it requires the operator's registration number, direct references to the risk assessment, and legally mandated mitigation measures.
Think about an inspector in the field. This level of detail is entirely about liability.
Like if they catch you doing something slightly different.
Right. If the authorization says you need a specific drone model with a safety tether of a certain length, and you swap the drone because the battery died,
Oh, wow, your authorization is just void.
instantly void. You are flying illegally. It's a legally binding recipe.
That is intense. And the paper trail continues on slide 9 with locations and records.
This is a crucial part of the safety system.
The slide points out that the authorization dictates the exact locations of the flight, including any cross-border operations in other member states.
Yep, the geography is locked in.
And it lists every document, record, and specific types of events that you have to report if things go sideways.
And that paper trail is what actually keeps the skies safe over time,
How so?
because accountability is baked in. If you have a near miss or a brief link loss, that report goes into a centralized database, like the one managed by EASA.
Oh, so everyone else can learn from your close call.
Exactly. The regulators gather this real-world data to update risk models for everyone else in Europe.
Okay, well, looking at all this custom risk assessment stuff, the GDPR statements, the recording, I'm exhausted just reading it.
It is a massive administrative burden.
Does every single flight require this grueling custom process?
Thankfully, no. There is a shortcut.
Oh, thank goodness. Which brings us to the fast track on slide 10, processing declarations.
Right. This is where standard scenarios, or STS, come into play.
So what exactly is a standard scenario?
Well, the authorities realized that doing custom reviews for every single flight would just crush the industry.
Yeah, a total bottleneck.
So they looked at common flights like inspecting infrastructure in a rural area and created a pre-approved template. That's the STS.
So if you fit the STS box, you just declare it.
Exactly. You raise your hand, declare you meet the requirements, and once the authority verifies the elements, you get a confirmation of receipt.
And you can just start flying.
Without undue delay, you're trading flexibility for speed.
I love that. And slide 11 shows how modern this is. It's all about the online system.
This is a huge efficiency multiplier.
The slide says authorities must have an online system for these declarations. I mean, what a relief not having to fax paperwork to the government, right?
Seriously. And the system automatically checks for missing fields.
Like when you forget a signature online and it yells at you in red text.
Exactly like that. It gives an automatic acknowledgement, which saves the highly trained regulators from doing basic data entry.
So they can focus on the complex, risky flights instead.
Exactly.
That is so smart. But on slide 12, we see some real cross-border magic.
This is honestly a fascinating bureaucratic victory.
It says the acknowledgement receipt must be in the national language, and at least in English.
Right, because think about a French drone operator doing a job in Germany.
Oh, navigating German aviation forms sounds like a nightmare.
It would be.
Yeah.
But there is a standardized magic phrase that unlocks the European skies for them.
I see it right here. It says, the declaration has been found to be complete.
Yes. That simple, standardized English sentence dramatically reduces friction for businesses.
Because any inspector can just read that one English line and know you're legal.
Exactly. It doesn't matter if you're in Italy or Poland. It proves you're compliant across borders.
That is amazing. Well, let's wrap this up. Moving to our final slide, slide 13, the summary.
It's been quite the journey.
It has. This slide summarizes the dual nature of Article 12. You have this really rigorous, deep evaluation framework for complex risks.
The grueling custom process.
Right. And then it's paired with this streamlined digital fast track for standardized operations.
It's an elegant system. But, looking at all this automation, it leaves me with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over.
Oh, let's hear it.
Well, we've seen how an automated online system can instantly verify a human's declaration for a drone flight.
Right, just instantly checking the boxes.
So as artificial intelligence and drone technology scale up, how long until the drones themselves are calculating their own operational safety objectives?
Oh, no.
How long until the drones are directly negotiating these cross-border authorizations with the government servers, completely cutting us humans out of the loop?
Okay, that is a wild thought. A drone just basically pinging the government server saying, I'm heading to Germany, my safety measures are robust.
Just talking machine to machine.
That totally flips my strict parents analogy from earlier. It's like the kid just taking the car and negotiating their own insurance on the way out the door.
Pretty much.
So what do you think? Are these regulations the perfect balance of safety and innovation, or just a lot of red tape preventing the drone revolution?
It's a great question.
Please share your thoughts and feedback in the comments section down below.
We'd love to read them.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.
Absolutely.
You can find links to other videos in the series in the description box, so be sure to check them out.
Lots of good stuff in there.
I'll see you in the next video from Maniac Sky Japan. Goodbye, and take care.